For years, Washington, D.C. was one of the most hostile places in America when it came to concealed carry. If you were an ordinary citizen living in the nation's capital, even if crime was exploding outside your front door, the city made it nearly impossible for you to legally carry a firearm. You had to prove a good reason, provide documentation that your life was in danger, sit through hours of interviews and classes, and then wait months, sometimes over a year, just for the possibility of getting approved. All while carjackings, robberies, and shootings turned the streets into a hunting ground. But in 2025, something happened that no one saw coming. Former President Donald Trump, using federal authority, stepped in and blew the system wide open. And overnight, Washington, D.C. went from being the slowest, most restrictive concealed carry city in the country to the fastest. Permits that once took 6 months to a year now take less than a week. This is the story of how concealed carry in America's capital was flipped upside down, and what it means for the rest of the country. To understand why this is such a big deal, you have to understand just how bad things had gotten in Washington, D.C. In 2023, crime in the capital city hit a boiling point. Police reported nearly 29,000 crimes in that year alone, including almost 1,000 carjackings. That means nearly 3 carjackings every single day, many of them carried out by juveniles who weren't even old enough to legally drive. Residents lived in fear, businesses boarded up, and ordinary people found themselves targeted simply for stopping at a gas station at the wrong time of night. You might think that a city drowning in violence would make it easy for its residents to protect themselves, but that wasn't the case. Before 2017, Washington, D.C. had what's called a May-issue permitting system. That meant you couldn't just apply for a concealed carry license, you had to prove you had a special need. Unless you had police reports showing someone was actively threatening your life, your application went straight into the trash. Ordinary citizens, people with jobs, families, and lives worth protecting, were told no. In 2017, after a series of lawsuits, the court struck down that system and forced D.C. to become shall issue. On paper, that meant anyone who passed the background check and training requirements could get a permit. But in practice, the city just found new ways to drag its feet. Applicants had to complete 16 hours of classroom training, plus 2 hours of live fire range qualification. They had to submit fingerprints, go through an interview, and fill out stacks of paperwork. After that, the waiting began. 4 to 6 months was normal. For some, the process took nearly a year. Imagine needing protection because of rising crime, applying for a permit, and being told to just wait it out for 300 days. That was the reality for Washington residents. The result? Despite a population of over 700,000, less than 1% of D.C. citizens had a concealed carry permit by 2024. Criminals didn't care about permits. They carried guns anyway. But the law-abiding majority was left defenseless. That's when Donald Trump stepped in. Under the Home Rule Act, Washington, D.C. is not a state, it's a federal district. And that gives Congress, and by extension the president, special authority over its laws. Trump leveraged that authority in 2025, ordering reforms to the city's concealed carry system. He funneled federal money and manpower into digitizing the permit process, cutting out redundant steps, and holding the Metropolitan Police Department accountable for delays. The goal was simple: if you pass the background check and meet the training requirements, you get your permit fast. And fast is an understatement. Where once applicants waited half a year, they now wait less than a week. 4 to 8 days is the new norm, faster than Texas, faster than Florida, faster than any other state in the country. In the place once known as the fortress of gun control, concealed carry permits are now issued at lightning speed. The impact was immediate. Applications skyrocketed as word spread. People who had given up on even trying before suddenly found the process manageable. A single mother working nights could finally feel safe walking to her car. A business owner targeted by repeat break-ins could carry without waiting months for the city to decide if his life was worth defending. For the first time, the balance of power between predators and prey began to shift in the capital. Trump's move sent shockwaves across the political spectrum. Gun rights advocates hailed it as a landmark victory. If the nation's capital, the same city that spent decades trying to crush the Second Amendment, could be forced into recognizing concealed carry quickly and efficiently, then what excuse did cities like New York, Chicago, or Los Angeles have? If D.C. itself had to comply, no one else could hide behind bureaucratic excuses. Critics, of course, were furious. Anti-gun politicians claimed the change would lead to chaos, that more guns meant more crime. But the statistics tell a different story. In state after state where concealed carry has been expanded, violent crime by licensed permit holders is virtually non-existent. In fact, concealed carriers are consistently shown to be among the most law-abiding groups in America. The fear-mongering didn't hold up against reality. What makes this development even more important is the cultural shift it represents. For decades, residents of Washington, D.C. were conditioned to believe that guns were only for criminals and police. Law-abiding citizens were told to rely on 911 to hope the police arrived in time. Now, thousands of ordinary people are taking responsibility for their own safety. And as more citizens carry legally, the stigma fades. It's not just a legal change, it's a cultural revolution inside one of the most anti-gun cities in America. Consider the ripple effect. A woman walking alone at night knows she can carry. A family driving through high-crime neighborhoods knows they have more than just their cell phone to call for help. Every lawful citizen with a permit represents another obstacle to criminals who once saw easy prey. And for the first time in years, people in Washington, D.C. feel empowered instead of helpless. There's also the national message. By proving that concealed carry permits can be processed in days instead of months, Trump exposed the lie that delays are necessary. If D.C. can approve permits in under a week, then why is New Jersey still taking 6 months? Why is California still dragging applications through endless hoops? The excuse that it takes time has been blown apart. Now gun owners everywhere have a new standard to demand. If D.C. can do it, so can you. The timing couldn't be more important. With crime still high across major cities, Americans are increasingly skeptical of promises that police will protect them. High-profile carjackings, armed robberies, and assaults continue to dominate the headlines. Citizens are realizing that when seconds count, help is minutes away. The concealed carry permit, once a distant dream for D.C. residents, is now a reality, and it may inspire similar reforms elsewhere. Of course, the fight is far from over. Anti-gun groups are already working to challenge the reforms in court. They argue that Trump exceeded his authority, that local control should override federal intervention. But the Home Rule Act is clear. Congress has ultimate authority over the District of Columbia. And as long as that's the law, the reforms stand. For now, the permits are flowing, and citizens are exercising a right that should never have been restricted in the first place. There's also the question of what comes next. If permit processing is this fast, will it encourage more people to apply? Almost certainly. Will it reduce crime? That's harder to measure, but one thing is clear, criminals now have to think twice. The days of assuming every victim is unarmed in Washington, D.C. are gone, and that change alone could be enough to alter the balance of power on the streets. The bigger picture is this. Trump's move was not just about concealed carry in D.C. It was about setting a precedent. By forcing the Capitol to comply, he's put pressure on every other anti-gun city in the country. It's a signal that the Second Amendment is not optional, that rights delayed are rights denied, and that ordinary Americans deserve better than bureaucratic stonewalls. So here we are. Washington, D.C., once the slowest and most restrictive city in America for concealed carry, is now the fastest. 4 to 8 days, that's all it takes to go from applicant to legal carrier. Trump's intervention didn't just change policy, it changed culture. It gave ordinary people a fighting chance in a city that once treated them as helpless victims. And it set a new standard for the nation. If D.C. can do it, every other state and city has no excuse. Now the question is, what do you think? Did Trump make the right move? Should other states be forced to speed up their concealed carry systems? Drop your answer in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next breakdown.